Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. My husband and I treated ourselves to a night at Radisson Blu in downtown Chicago. We don't get to do things like that usually, so it was awesome. The rates were very inexpensive, and there were certain things that you had no access to, like a room service and a minibar, but we didn't care. Since there wasn't any room service, we ordered off Uber Eats. Nothing fancy, just potbellies. And I went downstairs and it's 10 p.m. to wait and smoke a cigarette. To be kind, I went around to the side, but still near the front. There was no one walking around, and I got the food, but I decided to finish smoking around the side. Suddenly, a really nicely dressed dude with a camo mask walked up and asked me for a cigarette. And normally that's not an issue, but he seemed a bit off. I can't explain it, except to say that as soon as he asked me, I felt like something was wrong. His voice sounded odd. When I gave him a cigarette, he got really close, then it started to get scary. He asked for some food. I felt bad, but it wasn't possible to give him food. It was 2 sandwiches, and I said that I was sorry, but it was for my husband and I. I figured that he would leave and I could finish smoking. But instead, he walked up so close that he was against the food bag, and I was against the other side, almost pressing the glass. Then he asked for some of the food again, and when I said no and that I'm really sorry, he insisted that I could, but I was just lying. He was getting angry, but he wasn't yelling, so as to not attract attention, I guess. And it continued like that for a few minutes. Then he asked to use my lighter. I gave it to him, and he started in on how I was lying again. He insisted that I could give him the food. Then he asked if I worked there, and I said that I was staying at the hotel. I was already really nervous. He asked where I was staying, and I asked why, and he said because there were a lot of hotels in the area. I pointed at the hotel behind me. I don't know why, but I was just really anxious by this point. This whole interaction so far was scary, and I usually have no issues dealing with people. However, he was getting pushier and angrier, and then he said, "So, you're staying here?" I said yes. And during this entire time, he kept saying that I was lying about the food. He started getting closer and closer to me as I backed up. He kept angrily insisting that I could give him food but didn't want to, and I said that no, that I am sorry that I can't. We were already too close for comfort and safe distances. He was pressing against the bag that I was holding against my chest, and his face was inches from mine. He then said, "So, you're here with your boyfriend?" I said husband, and I saw him check my hand. I started walking backwards to the back door, which was about 50 feet away. I thought that if I didn't act afraid, it would turn out better. But I was afraid. His cigarette was lit and he was still holding my lighter. People usually give it back at this point. He continued demanding some of the food, and I felt it was time to be more assertive, so I demanded my lighter back, and he started getting angry at me, saying over and over that I could give him some food. And he then gave my lighter back, but then grabbed both of my arms. I started getting terrified and banging on the glass door with my elbow to get the receptionist's attention, but she ignored me. He got pissed and said something, but I was so scared I wasn't even paying attention. I just wanted help. If anyone reading this knew me, they'd know that I'd never bang on a window yelling help unless I was absolutely terrified. I started crying because I was alone on a side street at night and no one could help me. I had no thoughts but to get away. I wasn't thinking he'd hurt me in a specific way. I just thought danger and run. That's how scared I was. He got angry that I was crying and then pulled me closer. Suddenly, something happened that changed everything, and I'm so grateful. My mother called. I had my earbuds in, which he couldn't see because my hood was up on my coat, so I pressed answer and I started crying hysterically and almost screaming. "He's trying to attack me! He's trying to attack me!" And that really angered him because he tightened his grip for a second, but also startled him, and he let go and I ran to the doors while still crying and shaking. I cried all the way back to my room, and my mom comforted me on the phone and told me not to go outside again. My husband was so comforting and sweet, and he just held me and then he wanted to know everything. I had to say it a few times because I was still crying and I couldn't breathe, plus I was talking fast. I saw him again at maybe 1 a.m., and I was standing in front of the hotel this time by those tall ashtray things that they have outside the restaurants and hotel. I wasn't alone though. A security guard was beside me, and I went inside and I saw him through the glass where he assaulted me. I don't know if he was waiting for me or what, but it terrified me. And that same night, another person asked for a cigarette, and it was a really nice woman. She thanked me, but she could tell that I was upset, I guess. She asked and I told her. She sympathized and explained that's why she carried a small handgun which was in her purse. I'm definitely getting mace, so this doesn't happen again. I'm 18 and female, and I just started a job at a hotel a little over a month ago as a housekeeper. The hotel is located in a very rural Midwest, so not a super busy hotel, except for the occasional family reunions checking in and the few workers passing through the state. Many of the people who come through are older, around 40s, 50s, and even upwards. And when I first started, my parents had told me to be careful because the hotel was sketchy. I never really found it to be sketchy or the people passing through to be, until one day about 2 weeks ago. I had just clocked in at around 10:30 and I headed down to the end of the hall, opposite of where the lobby was, to start on my stayovers. These are rooms where people stayed more than one night. At the end of the hall, there were 4 rooms tucked in to almost a corner, I want to say. You can't really see the doors to these rooms until you reach the end of the hallway. There's 2 rooms on one side and 2 on the other. I was grabbing all the supplies that I needed to do the stayover when a man, another stayover, came out of one of the 4 rooms and asked how to work the coffee machine. He was about 3 times the size of me, 6'3", around 300 pounds, whereas I'm 5'3" and about 125. It didn't seem like a big deal or weird, and I'm pretty friendly and outgoing, and I can make a little small talk. I went back to cleaning the other room and minding my business when he comes out again to tell me that his room didn't need attended to. I figured so, and I was just glad that there was another room that I could check off of my list. My manager had come down to the hall to strip a room that had checked out, and I turned down the hall to go strip another room when the man came out of his room again. I assumed he had another question about something in the room, so I turned around to speak to him. He asked, "Aren't you scared to do your job?" And I replied, "No, not really, since I rarely ever have any interaction with guests as a housekeeper." He then went on to say that I was awfully pretty and I needed mace or a weapon to protect myself. And I showed him my car keys that I kept in my pocket for that exact reason. The conversation at first wasn't really off-putting, but when I realized what he was getting at, my body flooded with anxiety. He then said, "I don't think car keys are enough. You're small and could get easily snatched up." And in that moment, I went into the room my manager was in, across the hall, and waited for him to go back into his room before continuing my job as normal as possible. That experience really shook me up, and I sat in another room down the hall for about an hour crying and having anxiety attacks because I thought that this man would try to find me in whatever room I was in and kidnap me. So, to the man who stayed in room 131 a few weeks ago, let's not meet. This happened in the summer of 2010 when I was just entering my teenage years. My family took a trip to a really nice hotel in the city. I can't really remember why we decided to take the trip, but I remember a lot of family and friends coming and staying in adjacent rooms. I've never asked my parents, and it's not really important to the story. To preface, I am a bit of a scaredy cat, and I always have been. I'm a pretty skinny, fragile kid, so I get spooked pretty easily even now. But this, however, was almost definitely not me freaking myself out like I normally did. And looking back, I'm incredibly lucky that I trusted my instincts. This hotel had a strange design to it. The lobby was actually on the 4th floor, not the bottom floor, which I found strange. And to access the lobby, you had to use the elevator. There was no way for you to get to it from the stairs. And this information would have been nice before everything happened, as you'll find out. The hotel was organized in a square shape. Every floor was lined with a balcony, and you could look out into the lobby and cafe area from your floor. Essentially, if you were walking to your room, you could be seen from anyone that was on your floor if they just stepped out of their room and looked around. I always was afraid that I'd fall over the balcony and sail down 8 stories to my death, but they were high enough to a point where I wasn't too concerned for my safety. The first day or two was nice. My friends and I hung out and played cards all day, or we watched whatever was on TV. And at night, we would explore the halls of the hotel and tell each other ghost stories. It was a really fun time, even though I didn't fully understand why we were there. But on the 3rd day though, things got strange fast. I woke up to the sound of screaming coming from outside my door. Now, because of the hotel's design that I mentioned, sounds from the lobby would echo all the way up to the top of the building. So, when I walked outside to investigate, I immediately looked over to the balcony to see what the commotion was about. I saw a girl laying on the ground, eggs and milk splattered everywhere around her, and people were rushing to help her, and I even heard a couple of people telling each other to call 911. It seemed like the girl was unconscious, and maybe she had passed out or something, and I scanned the lobby and saw that my family and a couple of my friends were in the lobby getting breakfast, all staring at the event in front of them. So I decided that I'd rush down to meet them to find out what had happened. The elevator was on the opposite side of my floor, so I took the stairwell located right next to my room. We were on the 7th or 8th floor, so I knew that I only had to take about 4 flights down. Not really a big deal. I descended for a little while, looking for the number 4 on the wall, or the letter L. I passed floor 5 ready to find a door to the lobby, and I took about 2 more flights of steps before realizing that there hadn't been a door for the 4th floor, nor had there been a door for the 3rd or 2nd. Now, at this point I probably should have turned back, but I continued down because I was tired and I didn't want to climb back up. There were some weird side halls that went into pitch black areas with a bunch of piping and wiring, and though I was curious to explore, I just passed them by. I quickly hit the bottom floor, a dimly lit and cold room with cinder block walls and concrete floors. In front of me was a set of double doors, and I hesitated at first, but I assumed that this was just another way back to the lobby, so I opened them and entered. Behind the doors was a massive warehouse-type room, probably the size of a smaller basketball stadium, and the only light coming in was from the stairwell behind me, so I really wasn't able to see much. Stairs were stacked and covered in plastic wrap, tables lined the wall, and in the distance, I thought I could see boxes stacked and lined against the wall as well. I was probably in the storage room for the hotel, and I looked around and saw an elevator in the back of the room, so I made my way towards it. I closed the door to the stairwell and I began to walk in the dim light. The room was super muggy and dusty, and it seemed like nobody had been down there in a long time. As I got closer to the elevator, I noticed that it was a little bigger than the elevators in the lobby and on the other floors. I pressed the up button, but I got no response. There was a card swiper next to the button, and it must have been for employees only, I thought. I turned back towards the stairwell doors, making my way past the chairs and tables along the wall. And when I got to the door, I gave it a tug. Locked. Of course. This is when things started to hit me, and I realized that I was stuck in the dark, dusty basement of a hotel. I didn't have a phone because my parents wouldn't let me get one until I graduated middle school, so I couldn't call anyone. Everyone likely assumed that I was still asleep in my room, so I began to freak out, believing that nobody was going to look for me. I searched around the warehouse looking for other ways out. Some areas of the place were better lit than the others, so I looked around in areas that I could see first before starting on the darker side of the room. There was one other set of doors that I found, but it happened to be locked as well. And I began to cry, scared that nobody would ever find me in the basement. I swear, it felt like hours, but I think only a handful of minutes passed before I heard the door creak open. It wasn't the door from the stairwell, rather, the second door that I had found. A slim middle-aged man in a lab coat came out of the doors. Now, if this was 21-year-old me, seeing this man, I would be very confused as to why this guy was wearing a lab coat in a hotel. I was only 12 or 13 at that time, so I immediately was relieved at the sight of an adult who looked smart. I approached him, tears in my eyes, and he immediately looked surprised to see me, as you'd expect. "What are you doing here?" he yelled. "I got lost on my way down to the lobby, and I've been locked in here. Do you have a key?" I was shaking, eager to get out of there. He didn't answer my key question, and instead he said, "I know a way out of here. Follow me." He began to walk towards the doors with the stairwell, and I followed, relieved that someone had finally come to save me. We approached the doors and I began to reach for the handle, but he continued walking. "Isn't it right here?" I asked him. I will never forget the look on his face when I said that. He looked nervous, and though it was dim, I could see sweat glistening from his forehead and behind his glasses. "No, this way," he said sternly. I continued to follow him, but I was now nervous myself. We had passed the door to the stairs and we are now headed toward the darker side of the basement, away from the elevators. He looked like he had no clue where he was leading me, and as he kept checking around him, almost as if he was taking in his surroundings for the first time. We turned a corner and began walking towards the boxes. A dead end. I immediately froze, realizing that something was very, very wrong. This guy had no idea where he was going, nor did he appear to work at the hotel. I said with my voice shaking, "Okay, where are we going?" He turned and said, "This way, just follow me." And I knew that there were no doors by those boxes. I had checked there first after I found out the stairwell door was locked. I want to thank whatever God is up there for gifting me with the idea that I had next. I started yelling, as loud as I could. I yelled so loud that I gave myself a headache, and the man, irritated and plugging his ears, began yelling back at me. "What are you doing? Be quiet!" But I continued to yell. I don't even remember how long I was yelling. And finally, the man snapped and began quickly walking towards me. I went in a full sprint towards the stairwell doors, hoping to God that they'd somehow be magically open. He didn't run after me. He walked sternly behind me, muttering things like, "Stupid kid," and other kind compliments. I was about 5 feet from the door when somebody burst through. My savior, a hotel janitor who had heard the screaming from the stairwell. He saw the situation, me, and some random guy in a lab coat in a locked basement, and immediately told me to get behind him. The janitor asked me who the man was, and I said I had no idea, that he had come in through the door on the other side of the room, and I pointed the door. The janitor quickly radioed into the desk that he had found a child in the basement, and quietly, so that I wouldn't hear that, he said, "This man came from outside, get security," or something like that. The man in the lab coat started trying to argue with the janitor, claiming that he was simply looking for a bathroom. The janitor clearly wasn't buying it and kept saying things like, "Wait till security gets here and talk to them about it." And I was standing beside him the whole time, trying to take in what was happening, confused out of my mind. Eventually, an employee from the front desk arrived and took me back up the steps to the lobby where I met with my family, who surprisingly had no idea that I was missing. I told them the story, crying and shaking, and they hugged me tightly, thanking the employee over and over for their help. But I never got to thank the janitor though. Looking back now, I have absolutely no clue what that man was doing in the basement. I don't have any information as to what happened afterwards or who he was. I know for a fact that the incident with the girl in the lobby was unrelated. Something about low blood sugar or something. I'm not sure. I've thought about that day a lot, and the only explanation I can put together is that the door that I had found in the basement led to the streets of the city where he must have wandered in from. I have no clue what his intentions were and why he was wearing a lab coat or why he chose to pretend to know a way out. To be frank, this could have just been a huge misunderstanding of some sort, and I just chose a really bad time to get lost. But all I know for sure is if I hadn't screamed my lungs out, I might not have been telling the story the same way, or at all. So strange man in a lab coat wandering around a dark, dusty hotel basement. Let's not meet.
So, I've been a bit down on my luck as of late, and unfortunately have had to move out of my apartment due to the building being shut down because there was a major issue. I don't know the whole story, but I think it had something to do with mold in the inner walls or something. Basically, we were kicked out and told we could come back eventually, but there's been no updates for about a week. It's incredibly stressful not being able to be in your own home because of things out of your control, and to not know if you'll be told that you can come back and to just get your stuff really sucks. Thankfully, because this was an issue with the property and was not my doing, nor the fault of anyone that lives there, The rental company has to cover our living expenses until they get everything sorted out. However, they also have the ability to restrict where they are willing to let us stay, and they chose a hotel that is an extended stay type of place in a rather mediocre part of town. Now, I don't want to complain about a free living space, but this place needs some major TLC. The first thing that I noticed when I went to check in was that the main lobby's carpet was horrifically dirty, like stained multiple colors and fraying at most of the edges, kind of dirty, and the TV in the lobby was a thick CRT style TV that was really small. I know I sound like I'm complaining, but it's just one of those things that in 2022, if you see a CRT TV in the lobby of a hotel, it kind of speaks to the quality of the overall hotel. Some people will disagree with that, and that's fine, but that's just my opinion. Anyways, I checked in and got my key to my room, which was room 203. I got to the room and went in, and it was nothing special. It was a pretty bland and plain single bedroom, and that was fine. As wary as I was of the hotel, I was still happy that I had a place to sleep and that I didn't have to pay for it. Honestly, it was decent here for the most part for the first couple weeks, until one night in the second week, I got a phone call to my room. I answered it because it was kind of weird, and I assumed it was the front desk because who else would have the direct number to my room? I say hello, and the person on the other end says, "Hi, this is Howard from the front desk. There was an issue with your payment and we need you to come down to the front desk to clear it up. Shouldn't take but a moment or two." I mentioned that I wasn't the one paying for the room and that it was being paid for by my apartment complex. And after a moment, the guy said, well, if you could just come down here, I'll get your info and we'll get this squared away." Obviously, I was annoyed, but just said okay and that I'd be down in a moment. I grabbed my wallet and phone and went to the elevator and then went down to the main lobby. I got down to the desk and the same woman that had checked me in 2 weeks ago was working. I mentioned to her that I got a call from someone at the front desk saying that there was an issue with my payment. She kind of looked at me confused and mentioned that she was the only person working the front desk that night and that she wasn't aware of any issues. I asked her if there was anyone named Howard that worked there, as that was who called my room, and she told me that there wasn't. After a few more moments of her checking my booking and making sure that everything was okay with everything, I thanked her and mentioned that it must have just been a prank caller or something. She agreed, but told me to come back and tell her if it happens again or if there are any other issues. I went back up to the second floor and went over to my room, and as soon as I entered, I realized what had happened. I got in and my suitcase with all my clothes was gone. When I went downstairs, it was sitting on the chair in the corner, as I always do, and when I got back, it was just gone. I immediately called the front desk and told her that my room had been robbed, that someone had broken in while I was downstairs and stolen my items. She was a bit confused on how that could have happened since I was the only person that should have had a key to the room, but she said she would call the police and would send one of the hotel staff up to the room right away. I just sat there, honestly feeling violated, like I should have realized something was up, because there was no way something would have just been wrong with my payment, as I wasn't the only tenant staying here. I should have asked more questions and pressed the guy, and I would have realized it was BS, but hindsight is 2020. After a few minutes, I had a knock on my door from one of the hotel staff, and then the police showed up. I explained what happened to all of them. I told them that I had gotten a call on the phone saying there was an issue I needed to come downstairs for, and I fell for it. I then said that when I got back into the room, my stuff was gone. The police asked me if I was the only one that had a key to my room, and I told them I was. And the staff member mentioned that the only people that could get into the rooms were the customer that rented it and the cleaning crew. It was at that point that one of the officers asked if they had cameras in the hallways, and they confirmed they did. I'm not going to get into the specific details of all that happened, but they checked the security camera and they did see someone enter my room. Sure enough, he used a cleaning crew key to get in. It was a different color than the normal room key, and even the staff confirmed that it was a staff key. Even worse, the front desk knew exactly who it was that was on the camera stealing my stuff. It was another tenant of the building that I lived in. It was seriously someone else that was in the same situation as me. They had decided that they would take the time that they were stuck in this hotel to steal a key from a staff member and rob the other people staying there. I think he was surprised when I mentioned that I was there from the apartment complex, because I think he was targeting other people, but he still saw opportunity and took it. After the front desk confirmed who he was, the officers went up and checked out his room, and long story short, he was arrested. He'd mostly stolen small things from people while he was there, but when he got to my room, there was nothing sitting out except my suitcase full of my clothing. So he just snatched the whole thing and ran. Hence why I was the first to complain about this. I was the first to notice. In the end, he was arrested and I got my stuff back. And I am actually, as of the time of writing this, still staying in this hotel, mostly because I don't have much of a choice. There haven't been any more issues, thankfully, but I'm kind of paranoid now about everything I hear in the hallway, thinking it's going to be someone breaking in. I know that's dumb, but it's just a response to having my temporary home violated like that. Hopefully I get to move back into my apartment soon. Like, hopefully by the new year soon, but I'm not holding my breath.
I was working as a hotel maid in my late teens. I would go around and clean rooms that the guests had just left, and then start cleaning rooms of those guests who were staying 2+ nights. Usually, I cleaned their bathrooms, bring in fresh towels, empty the trash, and even sometimes vacuum. So, we had this one man who was at this point what we call a regular. He would stay at the hotel for 5 to 6 weeks at a time, and he would almost always be in his room, and nobody knew what he was ever up to. But he always looked shabby, looked like he never had enough sleep in his room, and had this lingering heavy smell. He was reeking of alcohol and smoke, but usually the mixture of both. But I had not seen him smoke or even seen cigarettes or alcohol in his room. I got weird vibes from him, so I would always leave the door open if I was in the room and he was there with me. I usually would put the trash can against the door and leave it like that until I am done and gone. So, one day like any other day, I knocked on the door saying, "Housekeeping," and I heard him say, "All good, come in." I entered and put the dirty towels in my basket and began cleaning the bathroom. He almost always had lots and lots of trash, which usually included junk food, an inexcusable number of soda bottles. I proceed to change his beds, and he sat in the recliner watching me the entire time. No small talk, nothing. I grew more uncomfortable, but then he got up, moved the trash can and closed the door. I immediately moved from in between the bed and the wall and sheepishly said that I forgot the fresh towels. He was leaning against the wall with one arm at that point and shaking his head. I said, "I need to get you some towels." Kind of pushed him out of the way and then ran out of the door as fast as I could. And I never cleaned that room again after that incident. And here are the top comments for my last video. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.